How's everybody doing out there tonight? You guys hear me okay? So how's everybody doing tonight? Can you hear me out there? All right, so I'm assuming that everybody can hear me. If you can hear me, chime in. Let me know that everything's working and stuff. All right, well, I'm just going to assume that y'all can hear me then. So what I wanted to talk about tonight is over the last couple, well, pretty much every one of these live streams that I've done, there's been lots of questions and conversation stuff just about a lot of things that are just kind of some basic music theory things that I think that we should go over. A lot of people, this subject is, I don't know, a lot of people seem like they're afraid of it, or they've heard stuff that it's this and that, or they say it's boring or whatever. It can be. It just depends on. Oh, hi, Raj. It just kind of depends on your, on you. You know, I mean, it's music theory has a lot of math in it. So some people aren't really into math, but it's not complicated. We're not going to go diving way into it. How I always kind of explain it to students, my private students, is that if you're like going to go grocery shopping and you've got $100, you kind of want to be able to have enough math skill to be able to keep track of what you're putting in your cart. So when you get up, you don't have more than $100 worth, but you don't need to be able to figure out what the, the square root of the price of a frozen pizza is in order to be able to buy it. So you don't have to get that far advanced with it, but there are some basic things. You probably hear people talk and they'll say like, oh, well, that's got a minor third in it, or you're going to go up to the perfect fourth, things like that. Also about understanding what chords belong into a key. So like if you're trying to like write a song, or you're trying to determine what key a song you're playing is in or whatever, you can use this really simple thing that I'm going to go over to be able to help determine that. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is we just want to learn the major scale. So, there's a couple of ways you can do that. There's like that. But I personally like the 3-note per string patterns because it's easier to alternate pick them. And if you get into playing with the modes, the major scale is actually one of the 7 major modes. It is the first one. It's the Ionian mode. And since they're all 3 notes per string, they all connect together. So like Ionian, you've got 2 whole steps. So notes 2 and 3 are notes 1 and 2 of the next position. And then the next one, so on and so forth. So like learning this is, it's going to help you in the long run. And just being able to know if you know the major scale and the pentatonic minor scale, that gives you a lot of stuff that you can use. Come on, camera, focus. It gives you a lot of stuff that you can use for your improvising and everything too. So the very first thing, let's just go over this pattern for the major scale. And what's nice about it is it doesn't matter what key you're playing in. It's always the same shape. But for what we're doing here, I'm going to do it in the key of G. So if we start here on the 3rd fret of your low E, that's a G. We've got 2 whole steps. So 3, 5, 7. And how you're going to want to memorize this is not by what frets, but by the spacing. So 3, 5, 7. So 2 whole steps. And then we move to the A string and we do 2 whole steps there. So now we go to the D string. We shift up a half step. And we go a half step and a whole step. So frets 4, 5, and 7. And then the same shape on the G string. And then when we go to the B string, we have to move up again. So now it's a whole step and a half step. So 5, 7, 8. And then when we go to the high E, 5, 7, 8. So you're going to want to memorize that pattern. And like I said, it doesn't. If you memorize it here and then you want to play it in a different key, let's say you decide, I want to play C major. Then you come up here to C, and it's the same pattern. Cool thing about a fretted instrument, you don't have to like memorize a ton of different patterns for scales. Okay, so this major scale, not only can you use it to, for improvising and stuff, if you were playing over something that was in the key of G major or E minor, you could use that scale, in conjunction with the pentatonic minor scale, like I said earlier. So aside from that, the other thing that what this is doing is that each note of the scale, each degree of the scale has a specific name for that interval. So what I mean by interval is the space that's between any 2 notes. So if you learn what the intervals are between this, then you can use this for chord construction, figuring out what notes are in a key, for putting together arpeggios. I mean, there's just so many things that you can do with this, and just for this one part of it. And then we're going to do a couple other things too. So what you want to do, I don't know what's going on with my camera, but I wish it would stop doing that, is, like I said, memorize the pattern. And then what we're going to do is we're going to learn what these intervals are. So every note that you play in the scale, and by the way, there are only 7 notes. I mean, I'm playing 3 notes per string across all 6 strings, but technically there's only 7 notes. So like here in this case, we have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then we're back to G again. Okay, so all of the notes are divided up into two groups. Every note that you play is either a major or a perfect. So the perfects are notes 1, 4, 5, and 8. And the majors are 2, 3, 6, and 7. And then it just starts over again. So like technically note number 8 is the same note as note number 1. It's just an octave higher. So in this case, we're starting on G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And note number 8 is another G. So that means that 8 is the same as 1, 9 is the same as 2, 10 is the same as 3, so on and so forth. It's just each time you go up a whole set of the notes, you've gone up another octave. Okay, so like I said, the notes are divided into those two groups. So a lot of this stuff, I really recommend that, write it down, because like I said, this is incredibly useful information. When I learned this at a really young age, and I did not appreciate it. I didn't even understand why I was learning it. I mean, it's good that I learned it, but I think that it probably at the time, it may have been a little either too soon for me to learn it, or the person who explained it to me, maybe it just wasn't explained right, but it just didn't really, I thought, oh, wow, why do I need to know this? Okay, so note number 1 is a perfect. So this would be your perfect 1, but what I usually do, since it's the first note, is I'll just call it the root note, because it's the note that the root note is the note that a chord or a scale or an arpeggio or whatever derives its name from. So like the root note of a C major chord is C. So we've got our root note, which is a perfect. Then we've got a major second, a major third, a perfect fourth, a perfect fifth, a major sixth, a major 7, and now we're to 8, so it's a perfect again. And then 9 would be a major, 10 would be a major, 11 would be a perfect, so on and so forth. So really for this, for right now, if you just do it up through 7, if you memorize that, then you'll know what the rest of it is, because like I said, it's just the same thing. So that means that here's an example. If someone says, it's the minor third in G. So here's G, 1, 2, 3, and wait a minute, hold on, I totally skipped a step. My bad. Okay, so you have to forgive me. I'm really tired. My brain is fried. My basement flooded last night, and I have been vacuuming up water out of my basement all day long. So it's I'm a little, and it's 9 million degrees in here too. Okay, so yeah, everything's set up into the two groups, the perfects and the majors. Now, there are some rules that apply for when you alter these. If you altered any of these notes by flattening them or sharpening them. So you're going to want to memorize these too. So again, write this down. So flatten a major and you get a minor. So in the case like I was saying a second ago, so in G, there's our third, which is a B. So if we flatten it, now it's a minor third, because we've taken the major and we've flattened it a half step. It's made it a minor. Now, so if you flatten a major, you get a minor. And what helped me to remember that is I thought of it like junior and senior. So major is like senior and minor is like junior. It's like father and son, that kind of thing. If you flatten a perfect, you get a diminished. So if you take, we talked a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, we were talking about the devil's third, the flat 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we flatten that note, now it's a diminished, because the fifth, perfect, major, major, perfect, perfect, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's a perfect. We flatten that and we get a diminished. Okay, so flatten a major, you get a minor. Flatten a perfect, you get a diminished. Now, what if we go the opposite direction? If we raise a major, we bring it up a half step, then that is called an augmented. And I don't know what is going on with that camera. If you raise a perfect, you also get an augmented. So it's easy one to remember. Anytime you sharpen, it's augmented. But if you flatten a major, you get a minor. You flatten a perfect, you get a diminished. Okay, so then there's this one other thing I want to talk about that you don't really hear a whole lot about anymore. Double. Hey, Mark, what's up? Double flattening. So if we was to take, well, actually, so there's one more rule that applies to that too. So if you flatten a minor, you also get a diminished. So here's the problem with that. It's double flattening. So here's 1, 1, 2, 3. We flatten the third, we get a minor third. And if we flatten it again, we're right here on the major second. But technically, you could call it a diminished third. But no one's really going to say that. The whole double flattening thing and calling it that, I mean, it's technically right. I mean, again, it's like math. So there's like all these, rules and stuff. That being said, too, when we get through all this, like I said, this is really great information to have. But don't think of this as like rules. Don't think of it like this is the guideline of what you must do in music. This is kind of showing you a map, so to say, of all the good roads. So it's like you're taking a road trip, and this is a map showing you all of the roads that you can drive on that are wide and they're paved and they're kept up and everything. But there's going to be roads that are off of that map that some people may not want to go on because they're a little bit rough. But maybe you do want to go on them because you got, a 4-wheel drive or whatever, like maybe it's an off the side road no one travels on, so you can go on and drive fast, whatever the case may be. So just think of these more like guidelines, and they're not rules. So rules are meant to be broken. Bottom line is, if you play something and you think it sounds good, do it. That's it. Regardless if it's like, oh, well, this note is a half step flat of being in the right key. It doesn't matter. If you think it sounds good, do it. I mean, there's lots and lots of really, really cool things that are not played, completely diatonically correct. Okay. So if we look at an interval like, let's go from 4 to 5. So here's our perfect fourth and a perfect fifth. Well, if we flatten a perfect, we get a diminished, but if we sharpen a perfect, we get an augmented. So this note right here, that diminished fifth, can also be called an augmented fourth. That's what they call the tritone. So it's okay, I like to say it either way, but as a general rule, as guitar players, we always just say diminished fifth. I've never really talked to somebody and had them say, oh, do an augmented fourth. I mean, it's just weird. Okay, so you want to memorize those rules. And then another thing here, and well, actually, before I move on, does anybody have any questions on anything that I've gone over thus far? I don't want to get too far into it and have to backtrack a whole lot. All right, so if nobody's got any questions, then I will just move on. So when we look at the scale, we should look at the spacing that's between the notes as far as half steps and whole steps. So we go, our first note is G, and our second note is A. So obviously this is a whole step because we're skipping over a fret, right? And then we go to here, another whole step, we're skipping over a fret. But what about when we go here? Is that a whole step or a half step? So if we look at it, one of the reasons why it's doing this with G is good, because we can see that from G to A is a whole step, and from A to B is a whole step, and B to C is a half step. So far we've got 2 whole steps and then a half step. So should we practice every scale interval in every key? Well, yes, but I would starting off, I would do this just the way that I'm doing it until it really clicks and you're not having to think about it. If one of the problems with, if you only run through something a couple of times in one key and then you start switching into the keys, sometimes it can be confusing and throw you off a little bit. But yeah, ideally you want to be able to play in every key. When I first learned the modes and the 3 notes per string scales, I did them always starting on F on my first fret. So I do Ionian here, and Dorian here, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, and then back to Ionian again. And that was the only way I practiced. And I got super, super, super good at playing an F major or D minor. And then when I go to try to play in other keys, I was just completely lost. Whole, half, whole, half. Yep, that is actually Watchman for you. That is actually absolutely correct. That's where I was going with this. So anyway, Raj, I'm not sure if that's, I'm saying your name right. This is D-R-A-J, Raj, I'm assuming. I hope that answers your question. So yeah, you want to memorize that. Whole, half, whole, half. And then it just starts over again. So 2 whole steps and a half step, then 3 whole steps and a half step. That is music DNA. You really want to memorize that. If you have that down, it will help you in tons and tons of ways, not just with this. It'll help you with lots of different aspects of playing if you understand that formula. Like I said, I just call it music DNA. You can take, even though like a pentatonic scale is like a completely different scale than a major scale, and it was come up by, a different culture of people, or harmonic minor is a completely different scale than the major scale, and it's come up by, another different set of people. You can still use this as the major scale. What we're going through is like a tool to be able to figure that out. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. So yeah, you want to memorize that. 2 whole steps, a half step, 3 whole steps, a half step, and then it would just start over again. Okay, so one of the reasons why that's important, and if you memorize this scale here, like I said, this is the major scale, but it is also the Ionian mode. So if you want to learn all 7 of the scales, you can do that without being shown the other patterns based off of that pattern and what I just said about the 2 whole steps, a half step, 3 whole steps, and a half step. So, for example, went 2 whole steps. So that means the next thing is a half step. So if I continued to stay on the low E, it would be right there, C, right? So, like I said, the modes they're 3 notes per string, and notes 2 and 3 are 1 and 2 of the next pattern. So that means you would start here. So now we're missing we cut off that first whole step, and we put it at the end. So now we're whole, half, whole, half, and then whole again. And then you could go to the next position, do the same thing. So the next one's going to start here, half step, whole step, and so on and so forth like that. So you can actually sit down with it and go through all of it and figure out all of the patterns based off of that. Okay, so where was I? Oh yeah, so like learn the patterns, the perfect, major, major, perfect, perfect, major, major, perfect. So what that's going to do for you as far as chord construction, and this we're talking about for dyads and triads and 4-note chords, like 7th chords. And here's another thing, you could write this down too. So there's, as you probably already know, there's like a gazillion different kinds of chords. But if you know your majors, your minors, and your 7th chords, that pretty much covers, a big chunk of music. I mean, there's lots and lots of things you can do with that. So simply, the formula for a major chord is a perfect 1, a major 3rd, and a perfect 5th. So if we wanted to make a G major chord, we would go to the G major scale and we'd take our 1st note, 3rd note, and 5th note. So G, B, and D. So when you play G like this, G, B, D, G, and either B or D, and then a G. I'm playing all 6 strings, but technically I'm only playing 3 notes. So that's the major chord. 1, 3, 5. Now to make it minor, we flatten the third, because what happens, and the third is a major interval. So what happens when we flatten a major? We get a minor. So we would take that that B there, and we flatten it a half step. So we've got G, B flat, and D. So doing G minor in this position like this is kind of a big stretch. So we'll just look at the bar chord shape here, because if you don't know your major and minor bar chords, with the root note on the 5th string and on the 6th string, it's 4 shapes. I think we have enough time. We can go over that too, because you're going to want to know those as well. If you know those and you know the major scale, you can play just about any song. Seriously, I mean, so many songs that they're just, it's just all based off of this, and it'll make more sense here in a few minutes. How do you become one with the instrument? How do you become one with the instrument? I don't know. I've been playing for a long time, like 37 years, 38 years, something like that. And I don't feel like that I have become one with the instrument. I think that learning guitar, or any instrument for that matter, is it's a lifelong learning process. I mean, I'll be forever a student of the guitar. Even though I teach guitar for a living, I'll still be a student of the guitar, because I mean, I learn something new every day, or at least try to. The more you play, the best way really probably to do that is to just spend as much time with it as you can, and just, do a big variety of things. I'm kind of a jack of all trades and a master of nothing. I play a variety of different styles, but I'm better at some than others, but I don't think there's one particular thing that I've mastered by any stretch. To become one, you wear it strapped to you all day long. Yeah, well, that could work too. First three notes of the Star Spangled Banner. So that right there is actually a triad. That is actually, but instead of going 1, 3, 5, it's 5, 3, 1, 3, 5. That's for the Star Spangled Banner. So that actually brings up a good point. So when I'm putting these notes together to create a chord, that's not the only thing. That is also for an arpeggio. Do you think character aesthetics go a long way? Because when I see you play, I want to cry. What do you think? Thank you, I guess. Is that you want to cry because I suck, or because? No, I'm just kidding. I think to a degree, there's certain players before that I don't think were maybe as technically good as other players or whatever, but they were just something about them that was so much more, I was reeled in more with it, like Ty Tabor. Ty Tabor from King's X, that guy, I've seen him live a few times, and he's just awesome. He can find notes on his guitar that aren't on mine, apparently. It's just amazing. Practice, Grasshopper, when you can walk across the rice paper without ripping your one with the instrument. Yes, that is correct. That was what I was getting to next, is the whole walking on the rice paper part. Yeah, so anyway, back to with the G minor. So we flatten them third, so we get B flat, G, B flat, and D. So if we take and we flatten that note, and I know that if you don't know the chord, I'll get to that in a minute. But that is also for building an arpeggio. So if you wanted to play just a major arpeggio, then you would play, in this case, you'd play G, B, D. And there's like a million different arpeggio shapes and stuff. We'll probably do that in the future, do a whole live stream on, yes, Ionian. Do a whole live stream on just arpeggios. I mean, because arpeggios are awesome because not only are they sound really cool, like especially like sweet picked arpeggios and stuff like that, but it instantly gives you melody because you are outlining the notes that are in the chord that you're playing over. Okay, yeah, so that would be for a major or a minor. So here, let's do it again though with an open chord. So let's take D major. So now we're going to come up here to D, here on the 10th fret, and we're going to play 1, 2, 3. So we got 1, 3, 4, 5. 1, 3, 5. So we've got D, F sharp, and A. So if we take the regular old open D chord, and sorry about my guitar not being in tune, I don't know what's wrong with it. It will not stay in tune. I haven't played it for a long time either. Maybe I shouldn't have grabbed one that I haven't touched in months. Ionian is major, a little geek told me. Yeah, Ionian is the major scale. D. So when we play this D major chord here, we've got a D here, an A here, a D here, and an F sharp. So we've got the notes that make up the chord. We're playing 4. We've just doubled up. We've got D twice. So you can play these chords just as 3 notes too, like, triads. Whoops. You can do it with that, but that's like a whole other thing we'll do on another day. Yeah, so we take that D major chord, and our third is this F sharp right here. So what do we do to a major to make it a minor? We flatten it. So if we take this note and we move it down a half step to the 1st fret, and then the other 2 notes stay the same. So you just have to, switch. I'm sure you probably know how to play D minor, but now you can see that's the difference because we flattened it. The major chord sounds happy, the minor chord sounds sad. Now, if we wanted to build a difference between harmonic minor and melodic minor, well, that'll be something for a different day, more than likely, unless we maybe have time here towards the end or whatever. But I don't want to get too far off of track from where we are. But that's a great question. So, seventh chord. So for 7th chords, you have different kinds. If you see it written, you might see where it just says G7 or G capital M or MAJ 7. That's G major 7, or G lowercase m or MIN G minor 7. So those are 3 completely different chords. And the first one I said that just says G7 is also what they call dominant 7. So this isn't quite as cut and dry as the other stuff is. So again, I would write down these formulas, that a major is 1, 3, 5, a minor is 1 flat 3, 5. So first let's look at a dominant 7th chord. So a dominant 7th chord is a major chord that has a flat 7. So it's 1, 3, 5, flat 7. So for G, we just need to find out what that note is, right? We already know G major, but now we want to make it G7 or G dominant 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now we flatten that note a half step. It's an F. So if we take this G chord and we add an F to it, we would get G dominant 7. Now, one thing with that is that it does depend upon where you are putting it in. Remember earlier I said that 8 is the same as 1, 9 is the same as 2, 10 is the same as 3. Well, that is if 9 is the same as 2, it's the same note, it's just 1 octave higher. So you've maybe seen chords before like E9 or C add 9. You wouldn't want to add the note where that's on the octave of the second. You'd want it to be on the 9 because it'll sound different. When you play two notes that are really close together, the sound waves, they bounce off of each other pretty hard. But if we take that A and move it up a whole octave, it doesn't sound as bad now. So that's why the difference there. So we need to take this G and we need to add an F into it. So we don't want to put the F here because the lowest note is going to be our root note unless it's a slash chord. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So we need to find another place that we can add that F in here, but not disturb the rest of the chord, not to remove notes that we need to be there. So the first thing we do is we just analyze what we have. We have G, B, D, G, D, G. So we got 3 Gs to start with. And we've got either 2 Ds or 2 Bs depending upon which way you play it, because you can play it like that or with the B string open. So we don't want to put the F here, and we don't want to try to put it here because, well, I guess we could. It's gonna sounds kind of weird, but actually it kind of sounds cool. Where we're gonna put it is here. So we're gonna still play these other notes. We're gonna use different fingers, and now the B string is open. So that's G dominant 7. So 1, 3, 5, flat 7. Now, for G major 7, it's 1, 3, 5, 7. So the 7th isn't flattened. It just stays natural. So in that case, we're going to take a G and we're going to add an F sharp into it. So we could do the same thing we did here, but just move our F sharp, up a half step here. If we get on the right string, we can move it up a half step there, or there's like the jazz style, shape like that, which I think sounds better. But you can do this with any of them. It doesn't matter what, like I said, we're just staying in G, mostly just because it's a comfortable spot to play in. Okay, and then a minor 7th is a minor chord with a flat 7 in it. So it's 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7. So again, if we take G, we're going to have to flatten the 3rd. So we're going to be B flat, G, B flat, D, and F. Or there's like a bunch of different voicings, and we're not going to go over like the chord shapes, necessarily, unless there's like something in particular that, a shape that you want to know. There's no guarantee I'm going to know all of them, because a lot of the weird jazz, Wes Montgomery, a lot of the weird jazz chords and stuff, a lot of those I don't have memorized, because I'm not really when I said I was a jack of all trades and master at none, better at some genres than others, jazz is definitely down on the list of things that I'm real great at. Not that I don't like it or have anything against it. It's just never anything that I've really put a lot of energy into. So, so there's your major, your minor, your dominant 7, the major 7, and minor 7. Now, obviously, that's not all, of the different formulas for chords. There's tons of other ones. If you had an add 9 chord or a 9 chord or a, dominant 13th chord, there's all these different ones like that. But, we're not going to get too crazy with it. Like I said, if you know major, minor, your majors, your minors, and your 7th chords, that covers a gigantic amount of songs that you can play. Would you say that the major, minor 7th is like the primary colors in red, blue, yellow, from where all other colors come from? Yeah, I guess that's actually a good way you could, I had to reread it. It didn't click. Yeah, that's a good way that you could look at it, because when you get down to it, the bottom line is that all chords start out as a major chord, and then they're just modified to be something else, modified to be a minor, modified to be, it's flattened to make it a minor, it's got a note added to it to make it a seventh, and that's how most chords will be. You get into some of the jazz voicings where they have a whole bunch of notes and we just don't have the ability to play all of them. Then a lot of time they'll, like maybe the guitar player will play the notes that are on the top end and then leave the bottom end notes for the bass player or the piano player or something like that. It's probably my favorite part about jazz is that it's not everybody playing exactly the same thing at the same time, same way through all the time. It bugs me when I see a band that has two guitar players and they're both playing the exact same thing. What's the point? If you have two guitar players, you should have one doing one thing and one doing. What I really like is when there's two different things and separately they don't sound right, but when they're overlaid each other, boom, then it sounds really, really awesome. That's how I try to write music. Let's see. Oh, okay. So the other thing is, now what I wanted to talk about is how you determine. We already determined what notes are in a key. How do we know what chords are in the key? So again, we'll just stick here with G. So we know that there is going to be a chord, or maybe we don't. Maybe I haven't said this yet. There's going to be a chord that's based off of every degree of the scale. So in the key of G, you're going to have a chord based off of G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. So again, another little formula to memorize. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. So write that down.